Yeah. Okay. I mentioned this morning, but you probably don't know Baba's books, or you're not acquainted with Baba's books?
I'm not.
Well, his most important book is God Speaks, it's called, published in 1955, and dictated in 1952-53. But earlier, is that somebody trying to bust in? It's Mr. Foley.
Sneaking in from behind there.
Coming through the windows that come
Do you want to do this or you're all right?
Yeah.
All right.
Work out how
Give me
they come
practice.
through the door.
In 1948, or it might have been the end of 47, Baba wanted to start dictating to Dr. Ghani Munsiff. I should get some photos of him to see what it looks like. Who was, of course, one of Baba's very close disciples, one of the first early ones, who was Muslim, an expert on Sufism.
Was he around when Baba was still talking?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay.
Was he a school friend?
He was a school friend,
Okay.
and back in grade school.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
They used to wrestle with each other and stuff like that. But then they got separated, and he met up with Baba again maybe in 21, or when Baba was going down to Bombay a lot. Really, the very early bunch. And he was very well-read. He was very interested in philosophy and Sufism and things like that. I would say of all Baba's resident mandali, he was the one with the greatest interest in that department. And he also was the one who would get Baba to discourse on these sorts of subjects. He would sort of make some snide comment insulting God or something like that, whose purpose was to get Baba, of course Baba knew what he was doing, to get Baba to, talk, and then he would get Baba to give these discourses. So a lot of what we have is due to him. And in, whenever this was, 47, 48, Baba Ghani was doing night watch, and I've got to look this up again, but for 20 nights or 40 nights, Baba had him read Hafez to him. And then Baba started dictating all this material. And Baba then was wanting him to write it up, but Ghani, being famously lazy, never got it done. Although when I look at this manuscript, I cut it. I mean, the way his laziness was, he really wasn't that lazy. He was just, he would be, but it was kind of his game with Baba. But he never finished, And then the New Life, Baba even had him sign a contract that he would be finished by thus and such a date. And still he didn't do it. And then the New Life came in 1949. Meher Baba left everything. He just cut off, anyway, it's a whole story in itself. They went out begging on the roads and cut all contact with most of his followers around the world. So Ghani was part of that. And towards the end of the New Life, Ghani died. So when Baba came back from the New Life, Ghani was really the one Baba wanted to do this with. He was the best one for it. And Baba seems to have gotten the manuscript and read it or read through it. And I presume that would be this manuscript. I would guess. I don't know what else it could be. Some draft of this, or the whole thing, or I don't know. And when he was in America, he was looking at it, and Baba was saying, just commented to Ivy Deuce that half of what he dictated wasn't in there, and he was going to start all over from scratch. So there was a dissatisfaction with it that Baba expressed. So what all exactly Baba dictated to him, I don't know. But I had for years and years harbored the intention, hey Lorraine, harbored the intention of going to Sufism Reoriented and asking them if they had it. even though that would take some prep and, sort of an issue to bring up something with a, a different organization like that. But then, there's been a lot more exchange with archives in India over the last year. And Jean Gusseff was taking with his phone shots of stuff he was looking at with Jessica, the Aussie on the archives committee, and looking at that, I thought, that is Ghani's manuscript. In fact, it was this. I think it was this page. And I was thinking, holy shit, that looks like Dr. Ghani's manuscript. So Jessica scanned it in the last couple of weeks, and there are about 4 chapters had been scanned when I flew over. I read them on the plane, and the rest just came in Dropbox over this last week. So this is all brand new stuff. And
they have no idea how it got into archives?
I haven't asked. I don't imagine they would.
Mm.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know how Ghani's...
And also interesting to know if there's another copy of it in Sufis and Reorient.
It would be interesting to know that.
Mm.
I would, now that you mention it, I never even thought about it, I would guess that somehow it came to Baba, that he would have had it to look at, and thus wouldn't have been among Ghani's own papers, which never have surfaced that I've heard of, but were among Adi's. So probably it got to be there that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so just reading through the first 4 chapters, I have no idea where to start with this thing. Here's another, and also each chapter is kind of confusing. It will be typed, and then there'll be a retyping, and then pages will be missing, and it'll be all crossed out here and there, and different drafts appear to be different. So it would really take some going through to make sense of it. So I just picked out something for today that I thought would be, you could try, and I don't know, if it doesn't suit, well then you can all write them in archives and tell them to throw it out because it's worthless. But here's, this I did notice. Let me see where it is. This really did hit me. Let's see. I mentioned this earlier. Okay, recognize this? Let's see.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah, look, John.
Anybody, does that ring a bell?
Yeah, right.
10
Yeah.
States of God.
Yeah.
And chapter 2, that's where Ghani was going to put it right at the beginning. And from elsewhere, it seems that Baba began God Speaks with that chart, the 10 States of God chart. That was his starting point. And in God Speaks, I'll take a mutilated copy and diminish its value here. Let's see. It will
Sure
say,
Steve won't mind.
huh?
Sure Steve won't mind.
You won't mind, just rip it a little bit. Yeah, The 10 States of God by Eruch Jessawala. It actually says that. It credits him with being the author. And I think I mentioned before lunch that Gary had told Eruch that he was the author of the 10 States of God. And Eruch seemed not to know that. And Gary presented him with the evidence. And I think it was a surprise to Eruch. At least that's maybe I'm wrong, I have to ask Gary. And Eruch said, well, mine was the hand that wrote. That was his response. But lo and behold, it turns out that an early draft of it is here. Done by, and some of it, I mean, it would take a little bit to find it, but some of it, yeah. God, the beyond state. The opening section before that seems to be parts of it, word for word, the same as the published chapter. And the names of the different 10 states of God are identical. A lot of the content in the 10 states of God is not here. So somehow Eruch got, for example, beyond state B, there's state A, B, and C. And the second state of God, 2A, 2B, 2C, I don't know if you guys are acquainted with that. That's not here. So there's a lot that's not here. But a lot is. So, I mean, Baba must have dictated it to him.
Have we got a date?
When was that?
48.
We're guessing 48. That's when Baba supposedly dictated this to Ghani. And as I was saying, Baba was bugging Ghani, are you done yet? When are you going to be done? And he even had him sign a contract that he would be finished by a certain date. And as I was mentioning before lunch, he even gave Ghani a valet to take care of his various needs so that he could focus on his writing. And despite all that, he didn't get it done. So anyway, so I figured we could start with this. I have no idea if this is the best place to start. And this 10 States of God would be interesting if you're interested in comparing Ghani's draft with the final one. But that's kind of a technical editor's sort of question. I don't think most people. But we could look at this and see. Now, some of this, I don't recall if it's true in this or not, this particular selection of pages, but Dr. Duncan went over it. And these comments may be Duncan's. And Duncan must have typed it too, because in a lot of places, the typing, then there'll be parentheses, oh, Ghani, and then he'll tell him this criticism or that, or, you know, you've confused this point with that point, or this contradicts what you said earlier. And Duncan was really pretty direct and biting. He didn't mince words at all, you know, and so that's saturated throughout all of this. So it's kind of hard to know what Ghani would have done with all of that. I suppose Duncan did it because Baba told him to. I can't imagine
You would think
why
so,
else that would
wouldn't
have
you?
happened.
Yeah,
It's a bit odd, Duncan making such comments if it was actually dictated by Baba.
Well, Duncan had just finished or was still working on the Wayfarers. So sometimes he'll bring up the point, Ghani, what you said about the types of advanced souls completely contradicts what is in the new must book. You have to correct this, or you have to, you know, like things like that. He'd say like that. So, but he speaks with a lot of self-confidence, Duncan, and his criticisms are extremely acute. The guy was brilliant, and he wasn't afraid to say what he wanted to say at all. So this is one of the questions to ask, is what is the relation between what we're going to be reading and what Baba dictated? I really don't know. It looks to me like Ghani was taking what Baba had given him and was composing a magnum opus. It would have everything in it. And
So Baba may have given notes or points to elucidate.
yeah, I think Baba probably was dictating what he wanted, and Ghani was just sort of taking it and making a big, huge book out of it. So I don't imagine this is exactly Baba's voice precisely. But you guys see what you think. I mean, I've just sort of looked at it in the course of, I mean, assembling these PDFs was a huge job. It's been hours and hours and hours.
Maybe this was a rough, and then he'd give it to Baba to, you know, final check, you know.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that it was
Yeah.
because Baba had him do a contract.
Yeah.
So it was supposed to go back to Baba.
Yeah.
And would Ghani have been reading the board, or do you think Eruch or someone else would have been reading the board and Ghani taking notes?
That's a good question. I don't
I guess you
know.
couldn't do both.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, when Baba dictated God Speaks, the first chapter seems to have been written down by Pindu, of all people, in Gujarati. Like that. And Bao said that at the beginning, Baba dictated to Eruch and Pindu wrote it down. So this corroborates that. We found the first chapter. But then Pindu said after that,
So that assumes Eruch was reading the board in Gujarati, Baba would dictate it in English and then Erich would read it to Pendu in Gujarati. Or Pendu would hear it in English and then write
Right
it
in Gujarati. Yeah, no, it's a good question. I wondered that too.
Was the board involved, or was it just?
Yeah,
That was 48. No, that's right. The first chapters were the board still.
Ah.
He gave up the board towards the end of the process.
Did he give up the board in
54. So I think he was still dictating God Speaks,
Oh,
but the beginning, first chapter. But it could be that Baba might have dictated in Gujarati because Pendu was writing it down.
right.
I mean, Baba could flip back and forth. And if you read the first chapter, it's it's declarative statements about there's the gross, subtle, and mental plane. You could really do it in any language.
So Gujarati doesn't have a Devanani script, it has an ABC script, does it?
No, it's the Devanagari script, but Baba would spell it out on the Roman alphabet board.
Really?
But Pendu Pendu understood English perfectly well, but maybe it was easier for him to write in Gujarati, that's what I would guess. And I would guess he stopped doing it because Pendu absolutely hated that sort of thing. The philosophy, couldn't stand it. So Baba probably, and Erich probably then just did the whole thing himself because not to torment poor Pendu anymore. That's my guess.
Right.
But because Erich was able both to read and write, maybe Ghani could too. I don't know. A good question. Okay, so how do you want to do this? We could just have different people who'd like to just read and comment. And as for all these notes, well, just sort of read whatever you feel like. I would tend to say just read what's typed. It's easiest. But if you want to read something else,
Have you got more copies?
I only made up 4.
Yeah, I'm having trouble reading it with these glasses, so you,
Thank you.
It's up here too for anyone who can see this.
I'm having trouble too. Anybody else?
Tony,
John, do you want to have a copy?
No.
No, I've got
he's got glass trouble
Am I
too.
obstructing?
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah, I can read it better up there.
Yeah.
John,
Okay.
come back a bit.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Oh,
Anyone want to start reading?
I'll start. The thought embodied in the above couplet,
Why don't you read the
We do
title and
know
all that
that.
stuff too?
the path and the pilgrim,
So that's chapter 5.
chapter 5. Sanama, I won't read that.
Right.
Beloved
Right.
mine, it is high time that I be initiated into the path of the
Calendars.
because to me the way of piety and religion is tiresomely long and tedious.
The Calendars are named for a kind of a radical wing of Sufism who are highly antinomian and break rules all over the place and say shocking and heretical things. And so Ghani very much, he said this is the age of the Calendars, where if you're looking for the great souls, you won't find them in the regular settings, you can find them anywhere. Like that.
When and where the path begins. The thought embodied in the above couplet describes the individual soul that has had its full measure of pain and pleasure, and having undergone hazardous experiments at the hands of the ecclesiastic, now yearns for the knowledge of the ultimate reality. And that too be the shortest and quickest route. The patent methods advertised by different religions and the conditions prevailing in the churches of all denominations with their dry dogma, rusty ritual and crude ceremonials no longer hold any great fascination for such a soul. He knows now that he must throw all precautions to the wind if the unconventional path of the Calendars, typifying the shortest cut possible, is to be shown to him. It's a bit like Queenslanders, isn't it?
Yeah.
When a soul evinces such an intensely painful longing for God and truth, He is then qualified to enter the path.
This is a story.
I keep losing my place. Does somebody else want to have a
There
go?
is a story.
John, you have a go.
Yeah.
I'm sort of scrolling, I hope that's not.
It's a little bit off-putting.
There's a,
Well, I'll just go with the bottom, you'll just have to sort of read from
Prompt.
your
Yeah.
divination, yeah.
there is a story of a master who constantly pestered a disciple as to when he would realize God. The master humoured him and kept on promising realization in the near future.
In a river.
Once, when in the river, the disciple again asked the master when he would realize God. The master told him to enter the water, and grasping him by the hair of his head, he held him under the water for a few minutes. When the disciple was on the verge of suffocation, the master pulled him out and asked him what he thought and what he wanted most while under the water.
There's a word from error there too.
Huh?
It said that the master kept harassing the disciple where it was the
Yeah, it was
opposite
round the
way
wrong way.
around. Yeah.
Mm.
The disciple replied, "Air." When the intensity of longing for God reaches its climax, like that of the disciple for a breath of air, then God realization
Automatically?
Yeah.
automatically follows. And how many aspirants are there today who have such an intensity of longing for God realization that they are ready to discard everything worldly as the price of its attainment. It is such aspirants that Maulana Rumi has uttered the following warning.
Up come
Come
to
to Tashangi
Das.
dust. Call out for water less, but create thirst for it more.
That previous story was in the discourses that I
Yeah.
recall.
Mm.
Yes, yes, yes. When thirst for water of a very acute and intense type is created, water automatically is realized.
And look at all those question marks from Duncan.
Are you sure about that?
Dodgy metaphor.
Yes.
In the words of our mother, the path begins with a conscious longing for a deeper reality. As the fish, which is taken out of the water, longs to go back to the water, so the aspirant who has sensed the goal longs to be united with God. In fact, the longing to go back to the source is present in each being from the very time it gets separated from the source by the veil of ignorance. But it is unconscious until the aspirant enters the path.
So that's a quote for something, from something. I wonder.
Yeah. Sufis call this attitude of mind tawbah, meaning turning away. And this turning away signifies renouncing everything.
So all these notes are probably relevant too.
Everything, the life of the senses, or the life of the spirit. And having done so, the aspirant, Tali, does not look back again at that which has been left behind. With the Sufis, the path consists of 4 stages. Oh, anybody?
Well, we could say as detailed below. As, yeah.
Yeah, man's life on earth, in all its aspects, is but a preparation, conscious or unconscious, for the ever unfolding realms of knowledge and illumination that culminate in God realization. Shariat Dharma Shastra is the first stage which concerns the masses in general and is characterized by the external observation of the dogma, the ritual, and the Holy Scriptures. The success or failure of this stage results in what is called heaven or hell in the afterlife, in the life after death. Since sincerity of purpose and worship from the heart on the part of an aspirant result in invoking a longing, mohabbat, for the path, which, in the language of Vedanta, is known as Bhakti Yoga.
I haven't seen that word mohabbat before. Mohabbat.
Is that's a Sufi term?
Must be.
Yeah.
It's mostly Sufi language with a very occasional
Yeah, Bhakti Yoga.
Bhakti Yoga thrown in.
Tadakat,
Adhyatma.
Adhyatma Marg, that sounds good,
That's in a discourse, Adhyatma Marga.
is the second stage. And here, the pilgrim desires direct knowledge of God. This is the path proper, Sufism. Here he abandons the observance of external formalism and replaces it by internal worship and the inner discipline, in which he is very often guided by a living master. This stage comprises all the phases of inner and outer discipline known to Vedanta and Karma Yoga, Raj Yoga, Hatha Yoga, Jnana Yoga.
That's it. It doesn't mention Bhakti Yoga here, and it throws in Hatha Yoga.
Yeah, which is just one physical yoga. 3. Hakikat, Ekyata, or realization.
Ek means one, so it must mean one attainment or something.
Is the stage where the pilgrim can be said to, this seems to be crossed out, the stage where the pilgrim reaches the end of his journey by becoming one with God, Vanafia. Marafat, Gnosis, or Anubhav, is the final stage in which the pilgrim becomes fully aware of all the subtleties of the path, attains supernatural knowledge of the divinity, Tawheed, and becomes
Must be aware.
aware of the states and stages of the functioning hierarchy.
Now there's a whole chapter on the hierarchy, and some of it has stuff from the supplement. I was just doing that this morning, so I happened to notice from the supplement, and some of it is elsewhere from Hujwiri or someone like that, giving more information about how many Abdals there are and how many of this and how many of that. Feel free to chime in as we go, by the way.
Amin Muhammad Ghazali has compared these 4 stages of the path to a walnut which has 4 constituents, vis-a-vis the outer skin, the hard shell, the kernel, and the oil within.
Ghazali is one of the most famous Sufi philosophers, theologians, died 1110 or so. I don't think he was a perfect master, but I think he was probably advanced. Genius.
To make the analogy more explicit, we may say Shariat is the outer skin, Tariqat is the hard shell, Hakikat is the kernel, and Marifat, the oil, and all these 4 components are interdependent upon one another.
I guess they're, look at this, these must be from Duncan. Do you mean this? Something from X.
The spiritual path may also be likened to a tree of which the seed is shariat, the trunk and branches, tarikat, the flowers, hakikat, and the fruits, marifat.
Marifat of Hakikat. There's some chapters, and maybe this one gets the title Marifat of Hakikat. Means knowledge. Marifat is knowledge, and Hakikat means truth, knowledge of the truth. So Marifat of Hakikat would be Bakabila, where you're not only experiencing God, but you're conscious of creation too. I think it means that.
Thus Sharia, to all intents and purposes, the foundation on which the superstructure of the subsequent stages of tarikat and hakikat and the marifat of hakikat can be raised. The four stages also represent different phases of the unfolding of knowledge in which inheres the standard or quality of certainty in relation to each of them.
Must be ilm. I think that ul is probably a way of writing al. Ilmul yaqeen.
Yaqeen.
I think the yaqeen means certainty. This is in God Speaks. Chapter 7 has some of this.
Al-mul yaqeen, or intellectual certainty, is born of learning and information from external sources such as books, sermons, and literature, and belongs to the domain of Sharia. The faculty which is most exercised in this respect is that of hearing, depending on its organ, the ear.
Why is that? Hearing?
Oh, maybe we
Because
do.
the Shariat, you know, is
You get sermons?
if you're deaf or unintelligent, then really that level of knowledge is not really available to you, is it?
Well, I suppose the thing is, if your books, your sermons, you're going to hear. Books, you're going to hear in your own head because you say them to yourself.
Yeah.
And so they're all things related to words, and words are related to the ear.
The ear, yeah. And in those days anyway, books would have been read aloud, and people would usually hear them more than anything else.
Like we're doing now.
Like we're doing now. Yeah.
And al-yaqeen, or perceptual certainty, is the result of seeing things as they actually are, by means of the physical eyes. The faculty utilized here is that of sight, through its organ, the eyes. So it's distinguishing between sight of faculty as distinct from the physical seeing. Yeah. This knowledge is peculiar to the domain of tarikat.
And tarikat is the inner path.
Hakul yaqeen, or certainty of realization, is attained in the seventh plane of the spiritual journey, which is hakikat. The faculty that comes into play here is the soul through its organ, the heart.
I wonder what the Sufi word for heart, gil or something else. I'm not sure it would be gil.
Do you think Sufis, just obviously they did, but they used the heart of an analogy, whereas Barbara explained the heart is the second aspect of the mind.
Yeah, there's a lot of Sufi psychology talking about those things.
Yeah, because Ibn Arabi talks about the heart as a faculty that transcends reason, for instance.
Yeah.
Very integrative.
Yes.
Everything happens in there. Yeah.
I have heard that the word, maybe, I don't know if it's in Persian the same way, but gil, I heard it literally means liver. But I always hear translation is hard here.
Somebody else?
Okay, where are we up to?
4.
Uphaliakin, or certainty of gnosis, concerns the perfection of divinity in man, by which he knows all the mysteries of the self and of the universe. The faculty that is brought into play here is the universal mind, or is universal mind, through its organ, the qalb, which is the seat of all discrimination. To illustrate the situation still further, let us suppose that a man is told that there is milk in a certain vessel. Not now. What's talking done here?
I guess.
Not required.
Oh, this is.
Not requiring. It doesn't require.
This is a critical comment.
Yes, doesn't
Being
require
white in
being
color and
said.
liquid in form, and Duncan
Not
thought that was.
requiring being said.
very
To have
problematic.
implicit faith in this information is ilmul yakin. One who is not satisfied with this mere intellectual faith and actually takes the trouble of going over to the vessels to see the milk with his physical eyes and thus convinced that the actuality tallies with the information, to drink the milk. No, wait a minute, that's
So I guess
missing
that's
the-
Ainul Yakin, which he crossed out.
Yes, Ainul Yakin. To drink the milk is Hakol Yakin, and to have within oneself the knowledge of all the components of milk, such as sugar, water, etc. Continued.
What would be
Vitamins A and D. Vitamins A and D.
What was the organ that it was associated with this last one?
Qalb.
What
The
is that?
qalb.
What's the
It doesn't say.
Huh?
Doesn't say, does it?
But what is it? Did you know more?
Let's see if I can. What happened?
Google it.
Yeah, Dr. Google.
Anyway, all right, I'll have to look later. I should know. I thought that was the heart.
Qalb.
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 But
Perhaps it is.
Just the back of each page, I assume.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Because you see this stuff on it that, for
Notes.
editing purposes, has to
Yeah.
get studied.
And to be able to describe them to others in detail represents the certainty of knowledge or gnosis in
I.e.,
i.e. Fal Yakin. Any ideas?
which is the
Which-
stage of
Which is the
Marifat.
stage of Marifat Hakikat. How this transcendent gnosis in the history of man on earth has unfolded itself and grown is very arrestingly depicted by the famous Sufi Bayezid of Bustam. The pure and original seed of knowledge, Marifat, was sown at the time of Adam. It sprouted at the time of Noah. It reached its full stature around the time of Abraham. It burst into flower, presumably at the time of Moses, and during Jesus' time the flowers yielded grapes, and from these grapes pure wine was pressed. During the time of Hazrat Muhammad, thereafter his followers and saints drank this wine to their heart's content and became fully drowned in God and divinity. What's after
I
drowning?
bet they did.
But they had to do so out of sight of the
Oh,
Orthodox.
yes, of course, of course.
It's against the law.
According to the Sufis, there are 5 types of knowledge affecting human beings. The first is the knowledge of the world, which solely concerns
And is confined to.
and is confined to the attainment and material well-being. The second is the knowledge of Shariat, which is mostly used by those whose
Something in the wordy warfare.
Yes, in the wordy warfare, to overthrow the
Opponents.
opponents with the logic and argument. This knowledge is something
That of the
the esoteric divines who are as dry as the skin of a walnut. The third type is knowledge of that of the spiritual path.
Thank you.
And it is usually found with those who have shunned the society of the exoterics and have seriously taken to some inner discipline. In this knowledge, the ego still persists, and the consciousness of, together with the good, clings to the soul. The whole discipline of the stage of Taraquat lies in eliminating the ego and all sense of duality. The fourth type of knowledge is that of God the Self, Hakikat. One who arrives at this knowledge has no tinge of ego left, and all vestige of duality disappears. No, says Duncan. The fifth type of knowledge is the real gnosis, marifat.
Marifat of Hakikat.
Marifat of Hakikat, in which all consciousness of high and low, good and bad, is merged in the ocean of divinity. The Gnostic, Arif, having become aware of the wisdom behind something phenomena, misleading,
Yeah, misleading maybe.
phenomena, sees no reason to deny or condemn anything. This is the stage of perfection associated with the prophets, the avatars, the kutubs, or the sadgurus. Unless a pilgrim goes through all the different stages of knowledge, the highest stage of tasawwuf, which is sulik, return to normal consciousness, can never be attained. Arriving at this stage of gnosis entitles one to be called a Sufi. There are, however, instances where people have reached the highest stage without going through the intermediary stages, but they are of the exceptional,
Yeah.
quite exceptional, but they are quite exceptional. Anyone else tend to
What was that
throw
word
their hat
again?
in the
I can
ring?
look it up.
What's that?
I can look up that word.
Yeah.
What was it?
Qalb. Qalb.
Q.
And if it doesn't come up, you can say qalb in Arabic.
Yeah, there's a couple of
I've
them.
seen that word a
Is
lot.
QLD or
Qalb.
Yeah,
Let's see what
I've
it says.
seen it too.
Qalb. Yeah. I think it's maybe a. They have all these.
Yeah.
In Arabic.
That smoke's coming from the back.
Okay.
Yes,
As John said, Queen.
Is that how you spell it?
Queensland.
I see.
okay.
Any signs of it?
It says questions to an answer, but there's also another word with an
Questions
I.
to
Let
an
me
answer.
see, that sounds like, let's see what that says.
Oh, Kali.
No, that's something else. That's a coffee bar.
It's found in the coffee bar.
Are you doing qalb in Arabic?
It's the
Might
pole,
be.
isn't it?
Huh?
Isn't it the pole?
Oh,
Kutu.
That's good.
That's good. Pivot, pivot,
Yeah,
yeah.
calm.
I thought it was something like the heart.
Yeah.
Actually. Qalb.
Yeah, yeah, I think it is.
A lot of coffee bar and stuff.
Hmm.
Have you put in Arabic? You actually put called in
So,
Arabic.
you want me to see it in Arabic?
Yeah, I would do that because, or
Uh,
Arabic colon quotation marks, qalb, something like that. To make sure that you just get,
You don't get the answer in Arabic.
yeah, it's not an
Yeah.
Not
answer.
very useful.
It wants to me, it asks me all kinds of, did I mean this, did I mean that?
Mhm.
I just meant what I said.
Arabic
No, you
heart.
can't do that.
Heart.
Heart. It is heart.
Yeah,
Yeah, good.
Arabic heart.
Okay.
Okay.
Shariat.
Yeah.
This is the stage governing the large section of humanity, which cannot and does not think out problems concerning its spiritual destiny. In consequence, it must have ready-made laws in the form of do's and don'ts, imbued with the semblance of divine authority, without which such rules of behaviour would have no appeal, so that people would pay little attention to them. The Church here runs the whole show, dangling before its protégés the idea of heaven and hell, connoting reward and punishment for good and bad actions.
Ghani consistently uses the word church to refer to the Islamic institution. He really thwacks Muslims
Right.
more than anybody else.
In fact, God at this stage, for the masses, is a God to be feared, and the only possible means of averting his wrath and inducing his favour is to faithfully carry out their external formalism of religion. The Sufis use the word shariat, in two different...
And all that it
He's taken that out. And all that it embodies in two different senses. A search relates only to the dogma.
One sense.
One sense. One sense relates only to the dogma and ritual for
the multitudes.
For the multitudes. And the code of morals imposed by a teacher in the form of do's and don'ts. The second sense is the active part that impels one to undertake all sorts of austerities and self-denial, physical and mental, for one's spiritual well-being. In this sense, Shariat becomes synonymous with tariqat, and when it is claimed that Shariat is the basis of all future spiritual progress, it is this second, active part of Shariat that is meant, and not the one comprising mere dogma and ritual.
I didn't know that Shariat had that
No.
That second
meaning.
It's not good saying this doesn't make sense.
Yes.
It is said that Rabia, the mystic, was seen to fly heavenwards with a bowl of water in one hand and a flame of fire in the other. When asked for an explanation, she flared up, responding, "With this water I would quench the fires of hell, and with this flame,
I would set
I would set fire to paradise." I find nobody who worships and loves God for his sake alone. The people of the Church are either attracted by the prospect of paradise or are merely hoping to escape the tortures of hell.
You know, she apparently became Hazrat Babajan.
Okay.
Takme, just like a Urdu. Takme ta rahe namayo angabin ki lag. Dozak mai me daldo koi laikar behisht ko. Khalib is one of the great 19th century Urdu poet.
In order the devotion towards God should not be induced by the alluring prospect of enjoying wine and honey, heaven. Would it not be well if someone were to destroy paradise by throwing it into hell? Would someone else like to read?
Any other readers? Do you feel like it?
Okay.
Sure. You want to read off the screen? Okay, you see.
Off the screen of the page, either one.
It can thus be seen that the Church all along has been pandering to the emotional side of man, and has always discouraged the searchlight of investigation and intellect. The importance and need of religion as symbolized by churches, mosques and temples, the early stages of man's spiritual progress, is never to be denied. World history bears ample testimony to the poignant reality of the statement, "Educate men without religion and you make them but clever devils."
So, I never heard that before.
A few of those around.
Yes,
Yeah, absolutely.
there are quite a few.
Revolutionary upheavals in the domains of politics, economics, and sociology
Of modern times.
of modern times shaken mankind out of its complacency, and thinking mind, self-complacency. In the domain of religion in particular, humanity has been shocked to discover that churchianity has badly let them down. This cruel realization has been brought home nowhere more forcefully than in the world of Islam.
I see what you mean.
It's interesting that before they referred Sharia law to
Yeah.
the do's and don'ts, but it's the Sharia law that
Yeah, that's what he's talking
it's
about.
like blatantly, this is base.
Yeah, yeah. Baba used it, Sharia, to refer to this aspect of religion in general and not just Islam.
Mm.
But this is written back in the days before, terrorism and the rise of this extremism. But
Yeah.
Ghani was really, really critical of them anyway.
Cool. Professionals in Islam, the custodians of conscience. What is it? I don't really know what. The custodians of man and spiritual well-being have not only kept pace with the fast-changing panorama of the world. I can't read that word.
World conditions.
World conditions. As ignorant.
But they have also shown themselves.
that scribble there.
But
Yeah.
they have, as ignorant and misinformed about things spiritual and worldly as these were,
Those whom they were.
as those whom they were expected to lead, and who can deny that the unhappy state of affairs has not corroded the something
Texture?
Luster, is it?
the luster
Oh.
Or what?
Corroded the luster, huh?
of all the religions of the world today.
It should therefore be
It sh-
something.
It should therefore be viewed. I don't know where to go from there. What is the true implication and significance of Sharia? This external formalism of all religion, which the Church makes a great fetish of. It has been denied into it's been dinned into the ears of Muslims for centuries that Sharia and Sharia alone is the
Be all.
and
End all.
be all and end all of existence, and the one who does not conform to the external form of Sharia something.
Even if he is in
It's something by many people, by some people,
is a
to
lot.
be a saint of the highest order.
Considered.
Considered.
Is a lost soul.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
If by Sharia is meant merely the external observance of dogma and ritual, then it is a poor conception indeed. The fact too patent to be denied is that the divine law has been continuously evolving highly spiritual souls from the peak of mankind, whether they were
What is that?
something.
Wealthy?
Shariat mongers or not was the original thing. Whether they were.
addicted to Sharia.
That might be too hard to figure out.
This exclusive
Attention.
attention Sharia has landed the Muslim world into the valley of indecision, and they are not at their wits' end. They are now at their wits' end how to climb out of it.
Huh. Wow.
The truth must be faced that man is the outcome of a drawn-out evolutionary struggle, and is the logical result of experiences of pleasure and pain that has undergone incarnations.
Innumerable.
Innumerable incarnations. All these travails and experiences, therefore,
Up to the point
I can't read that.
at which the individual soul
Makes a determined and conscious effort to shake off its materiality, constitute the whole of Sharia and nothing less. It is in this comprehensive sense that Sharia can be called the foundation of all spiritual progress. It is this Sharia, with its infinitely variegated experience of pain and pleasure through untold lives, that may rightly be deemed the basis for the unfolding of the later stages of tariqat, harikat, and the marifat.
He's getting a much bigger idea of Sharia, isn't he? It's not just rules and dogmas, but it's the experience, experiences.
It's almost like you say, it's the experience, the suffering and the pleasure and suffering, pain caused by Shariat is what eventually drives you from Shariat.
Wow. Conscious material is determined and conscious to shake off, up to the point at which the individual soul makes a determined and conscious effort to shake off its materiality, constitute the whole of Shariat. Wow.
It's like the entire collective trance of normality.
Yeah. Huh. And he's giving that a place of honor in the sense that it's the foundation from which the others arise.
The unintelligent and mechanical observance of a prescribed dogma or ritual, and that too in one lifespan,
In that one lifespan only.
To the deliberate exclusion of the possibility of tapping higher sources of life and light, is downright
Sophistry.
and self-deceit. The idea of Sharia intrinsic
Meaning.
Good? Intrinsic meaning by the poet when he's saying
Mere wujud hi khud unki yaad o tathai ke reshe se sarih ek jabine sujud.
my very existence is an answer to all the discriminative and devotional, since the immanent in every fibre of my being is a forehead repl of the infinite, replete of the infinite,
with infinite obeisances.
What does that mean? In my
It's
being,
immanent in every
every-
fibre of my being.
being
Every cell of my being
has
bows
bows to you. Wow.
mm,
Wow. Discriminative and devotional. Huh. All right, that's just Shariat. Now I get to
Boy,
talk
that's
about-
exhausting, that really.
The team effort.
Any other? I can read a bit.
We have coffee.
Anyone else?
Oh,
I'm happy to. Takikat, the Adhyatma Marg of Vedanta, according to the Sufis, marks the turning point in man's spiritual career. It is the discipline proper and concerns all questions relating to the esoteric side of life and the inner development of consciousness. At this stage, the pilgrim appears to adopt an attitude of mind which seems to set at naught all conventionalism. For the pilgrim is now concerned more with the goal itself than with the minor details of how to get there. He, where's the verb?
crowd sale.
He crowds sail. Oh, that's interesting. I guess this beating into the wind. Crowds sail to reach his destination as soon as possible. The great Sufi, Wali Qalandar, Ghani really took an interest and seems to have known about these Qalandars. There's a whole line of them. Depicts the correct attitude of the pilgrim at this stage. He says, heresy, kufar, that's what they call a heretic, a kafir, that takes me to God is far preferable to conventional faith, Islam, that keeps me away from God. That's why Qalandars tended to get into trouble for saying things like that. Different religions are like general remedies available to one and all. But in serious and urgent illness, a physician, simply must be consulted. His job consists
Or
in...
surgeon.
Hmm?
I think or surgeon, the physician or surgeon.
Oh, or surgeon. Okay. Must be consulted. So Duncan stuck the surgeon in there.
Is he a surgeon?
I think he was trained in surgery, as a matter of fact. Since he was performing surgery on this text. His job consists in treating different patients according to the individual needs. In the same way, spiritual masters treat each aspirant individually and give him the particular type of instruction that he needs.
Needs?
That he, is that needs? It's a little hard to
Yeah, it's
cut off
everything
there.
makes sense.
Really needs.
Hence, the truism of the Sufis and Vedantists that there are as many religions as there are human beings pointedly applies to this stage of man's progress, which I can't quite read that word,
Doesn't
something.
even, no. Which,
Which the Sufis call.
The Sufis call tariqat. The Shariat of all religion, in the Shariat of all religions, there is a marked tendency towards standardization, but in tariqat, with a view to achieving greater and quicker results, it is individualism that is encouraged, and consideration of what is merely customary is waved aside. The crux of the situation gets cut. The
latitudinarianism, what a word!
the latitudinarianism and unconventional, is there a verb there? The fact is that latitudinarianism and unconventionalism, which characterize the stage of tariqat, cause a flutter in the dovecotes. What are the dovecotes? You know?
That's where they keep the
Well, the
doves.
coat is where they keep the dove.
Oh, I see. A flutter in the dovecotes of the established church. And invite many ugly reactions as one, may see from the something of
Record?
the record of the religious history of the world. This quite unnecessary misunderstanding, Duncan didn't like misprision, can be explained by an apt simile. He says, see Oxford Dictionary, this word is... Duncan was tough. He'd whip out the dictionary. He'd remind Ghani about what he had said back in chapter 2. He was really quite a reader. The stage of Shariat is like milk, which everyone... Is this the next page, in fact? Or I'm not confident that I did this right. That was page 9, yeah. So this looks good. Okay. The stage of Shariat is like milk.
Uh-oh.
Let's see if I can, there we go. Which everyone understands, contains butter, and yields it when desired. When butter is to be made, the milk must be churned, leaving a residue of buttermilk. The stage of tariqat,
Soured
with-
and spoiled, yeah.
huh?
He had soured and spoiled.
I see.
He's thinking of cheese.
Oh. Huh. The stage of tariqat, with its disciplines of meditation, discrimination, seclusion, selfless service, or self-denial, is like the churning
That yields butter.
that yields butter.
No, it's not
These-
butter.
The spiritual advancement. He put God realization, but Duncan said, The sage Kabir has illustrated this by the following image, I guess. Tan mat kahe mandahi aur surat balavan hat Kabir makan ka ge aur chanch piye sansar. The body of man is the vessel which contains the Kurd's mind. Churning the mind with the rod of meditation and self-denial, Kabir got butter out of it, leaving mere buttermilk for the world at large. In the stage of tariqat, even a little glimpse of the alluring contents of the path claims the pilgrim forever. But this path has no place for the merely curious and entertains no preference for caste, pedigree, or wealth. The Sufis maintain that entry into the path proper depends upon eligibility and preparedness, and having been once admitted, there is no exit.
Once you're there, you're there.
Good
Yep.
sentence. I want to go home.
Sorry.
Too late. Khadgan eke isko me koi ane na paye. Sounds like Kabir also. Garbe kabar ajaye kupir jane me paye. There is an unspoken law that the path admits no one indiscriminately, but one gaining access to it, even inadvertently, finds it impossible to get out of it.
Hey, I didn't mean to come this way.
I never heard this before. Did you ever hear this?
No.
Once you get into the path, you can't get out?
No.
Yeah, well Baba did say that consciousness is never lost.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
I understand. Yeah.
Cool. But somehow I would have, never would have occurred, I'd
Well,
get
there
into
is the thing of the fourth plane,
Fourth
though,
plane,
where
yeah.
consciousness can
Right.
be almost destroyed and,
Yeah.
Right.
and send you back to.
A long
But that's
way.
almost like a safety valve to
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
sure you don't do any radical damage when you're coming
It's
into
a-
the powers.
It's a threat,
That's right.
because mostly the perfect master saves you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Except if he doesn't like you.
then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Anyone want to take us on to Hakikat?
saying? Be brief.
Be brief. You.
Snappy.
Snappy. Yeah. This, what's that?
Something
Represents,
connotes
This connotes and represents.
Yeah.
something as if there was something.
Yeah, yeah.
Discrimination?
It's too long-winded.
Yes.
Mm.
Hakikat is the goal of all spiritual endeavour, and the end of the first spiritual journey through the planes. It is the plane of God realization, known as Fana Fila by the Sufis, which is the final Fana as compared with the minor Fana of the 6 lower planes. As far as the individual is concerned, there is nothing higher to be desired between this,
Because this state of Hakikat.
because this state of Hakikat is the highest aspect of Tawheed, unity of God, as compared with the
Incomplete.
incomplete Tawheed of the lower stages of the spiritual unfoldment. Hazrat Jahangir Samani describes 4 stages of Tawheed.
I've never heard of him before.
He's a Zoroastrian.
Ah,
Jahangir. Or is that also a Muslim name?
Muslim name too.
Yeah. The first is Tawheed Imani, which is the unity of God based on faith, and
This Tawhid.
this Tawheed characteristic of the
Multitude.
who habit on the authority of the church. To rest content with this type of Tawheed is to own one's helplessness and weakness.
Huh.
The second is Tawheed Ilmi, which is based on knowledge and inner conviction. In some of its outer aspects, it resembles the Tawheed of the multitude.
Huh.
The third is the Tawheed Rasmi, which is a formal acceptance of the unity of God derived from books, arguments, and logic. The intellect here has formed a certain conception of the unity of God based on conjecture and information, although it has no tinge of reality about it. This is the Tawheed of the philosophers and thinkers. The fourth is the Tawheed Ihali, which is born of inner realization and experience. Herein, no duality remains, and the individual characteristics of the traveller are emerged and obliterated in the ocean of divinity. Tawheed Ihali is the result of where he wants to go there.
Illumination.
Yeah,
Seems to be.
questioning that.
Maybe there's something on the other side of the page.
While Tawheed Ilumi is the result of meditation.
Oh, the previous one is more meditative.
In Hali, all impressions of one's humanity are obliterated. In Ilumi, the impressions of humanity are very little affected. In Hali, the only reason for the continuance of some impressions is that they resemble.
There should
There
be an
should be.
orderliness.
So they have orderliness and beauty in the work that the pilgrim has to undertake on the material plane after his return to normal consciousness.
So this is God realization. Huh?
Yeah, but it's also talking about perfect master.
And here this is,
Status of-
the
yeah.
yoga sanskaras that you come back with. Okay. This is the fourth. Anyone?
What about that? Marifat of Hakikat, however, where's he gone? Oh, I see. Marifat literally means to know anything. Something the pilgrim.
When, however.
When, however, the pilgrim reaches this stage of Mahikat, he comes to know himself as reality, which in other words means self-realization or God-realization. If, after experiencing the highest and final stage of annihilation, Whanathila, the pilgrim attains Baka, which is the return to normal consciousness, Sahu, then true Marifat of Hakikat results. All those...
But it's tough. Strictly speaking,
Marifat begins with the first steps of the spiritual journey. It has a relative value on those planes which are still in the domain of duality. But the gnosis of Marifat, of one in the state of Bakik Bila, is unique. Here the pilgrim is endowed with the knowledge of Tahid, unity of God, of the states and stages of the saintly hierarchy, of all the mysteries of the mental and subtle and spheres of the mental and subtle spheres, and of the secrets of time and space, cause and effect, heaven and hell. The Marifat of the seventh plane of God realization in the state of Baka, according to the Sufis, is true fakiri, the perfection of all perfection, which, once attained, can never be marred by anything. This gnosis or jnana has nothing in common with intellectual understanding of the divine theme, with which it is very often ignorantly identified. True Marifat in the Makikat,
the Marifat of Hakikat.
What's he got after that?
So
is so transcendent.
Is so transcendently unique and so revolutionary that one in possession of it suffers crucifixion every second, because he must play a dual role with the world and with its people, who are incapable of understanding him. An inadvertent statement of a divine fact has often invited the most cruel torture upon the Gnostic from the ignorant masses or
the
bigoted church. The following are some of the utterances of renowned Sufis on the subject. We prophets have been enjoined to keep people at their proper level and talk to them according to their intellectual and understanding. Prophet Muhammad. Here in my breast are many sciences, ulum, for those who can bear and sustain them. Saints' breasts are veritable graves for the secrets of God. Hazrat Ali.
I think that would be Ali.
Yes, Muhammad's Ali.
Muhammad's Ali. You would call him Hazrat Ali.
I conceal from people the gems of knowledge, lest the ignorant amongst them, coming to know of them, should put me to trouble. If I were to disclose them, they would call me an idolater, and they would consider it lawful to kill me, feeling pleased with the act, although this act of killing is in itself bad. Sayyid Zanul Abidin. Verily God created the seven skies and the seven earths. If I were to interpret this text fully, people would stone me and dub me a kafir. Hazrat Abbas. I have within me the light, Nur, which if I were to disclose to the world would cause the ignorant to condemn me to death. If I were to divulge secrets, the critics would say that I was not a Muslim. Thus ul Azam.
I've never heard of most of these people.
I have imbibed two types of knowledge from the Prophet. One of them I gave out to the world, and had I disclosed the other knowledge, that
That I have.
I had, I would have been killed by the people. The first type of knowledge is the knowledge of the past, and the second is the knowledge concerning the future of man, which is tahib, unity. And when the world comes to hear of it, it will deny it wholesale. Abu Huraira. St. Francis said this too. He said there is a thing the wise that, the wise men limit what they say.
Yeah.
So he gets to a certain stage in one of his poems and then he backs off.
Who is this?
St. Francis.
Wow.
My breast is a veritable treasure house of knowledge, but I do not find anyone to whom I can safely divulge it. The intellectuals and the learned, if given this knowledge, would use it to ensnare the people and the world. It is beyond the comprehension of the illiterate and the ignorant. But God in His mercy brings into being now and again some people who are fit receptacles for this transcendent gnosis. Hazrat Ali.
Yeah. I can well believe that Eruch couldn't. He never would say things like this, but then he had this kind of knowledge.
Yeah.
The path. There may be 1,000 spiritual seekers enjoying as many spiritual experiences, but there is only one path, or gnosis. It is an internal, but an actual pathway. Though not of
course, literally.
Of course, literally. No, not of course, literally, like an ordinary path, yet it is distinctly perceptible as such to the internal eye of the true mystic or Gnostic, who actually feels himself travelling along it. Even those true mystics who have experienced can only explain the sections of the path that they themselves have traversed. Those who have reached the critical point on the third plane can know nothing about the fourth plane, and they cannot lead anyone up to their own level. Their knowledge and experience are limited to themselves. Only those on the fifth and sixth planes can enable others to experience the planes up to their own level. They alone can be said to know the path to some extent, and anyone on whom their grace descends will be greatly benefited. Essentially, there is nothing like chance and accident in creation. They seem to exist because we lack knowledge of the past and the future. Even those on the fifth plane do not know why they are so pleased to help a traveller along the path. But those on the sixth plane, because they are aware of the connections in past lives, know why their grace descends on certain people.
Now, do you suppose that implies that on the fifth plane they don't know about
That's
past
what it seems to be saying.
Yeah.
They don't know why they're impelled to help a particular person. So the fifth plane was the one of the intellect, of the thoughts, and the sixth of the heart.
Yes.
So heart knows.
Heart knows, yeah.
The Majzubs, who are on the seventh plane, have achieved perfection, have nothing to do with the path of Gnosis, because for them duality and all phenomena no longer exist. Only the state of I am God persists. The perfect masters, on the other hand, have the power of lifting anyone from among the uninitiated millions to the higher planes, and in the twinkling of an eye can give a disciple God realization. The individual souls of the world are within the limits of the gross sphere or universe, which includes all the gross suns. Now, so we're not allowed to say
These
stars.
are the same thing.
Same thing,
Stars
suns
are
and
suns.
stars. That's not the number.
Duncan's not going to let him get away with that.
Moons, worlds, space, and ether. A savage.
Pulling it down to earth.
That's right.
A savage.
What's that he
ignorant
says there? Roll back a bit. What's that bit?
Plane
plane
or sphere.
One
This
is
is
flat, the
Duncan.
other round.
This is Duncan. One is flat and the other round.
Yes.
So the difference is suggested by the something of
By
a
use of a
different
different word.
word.
But are they? Are
Is
these
there
so
a difference?
But
Yeah,
is there a
he's
difference?
asking. Yeah.
Yes. The
God, that was
savage,
sharp.
the savage, ignorant of the most elemental scientific laws and of the code of right and wrong, and a great philosopher or scientist are both within the bounds of the gross sphere. The philosopher may be theoretically quite familiar with the subjects concerning the subtle sphere, and the scientist may be an authority on the electron and the ether. But from the standpoint of the subtle, they and the savage belong to the gross sphere. Until the subtle sphere is experienced, the gnosis remains a subject for intellectual gymnastics for all those belonging to the gross sphere, because by subtle we do not mean the finest form of the gross. In the ordinary sense of the word, it is correct to call very fine substances, such as ether, atoms. The dog is really having a go. Subtle. But they are unquestionably matter, though in a very fine form. In talking of spiritual concerns, subtle means something completely different from the material or physical, however fine or attenuated these gross things may be. Although the gross sphere is the outcome of the subtle sphere and is dependent upon it, the subtle sphere is completely independent of the gross or physical world. As an example, we may take the act of eating. The gross act is the outcome of the thought and depends upon it, but the thought is independent of the physical act. We can have the thought of eating independently of the physical act. It is wrong to assume that glimpses of the spirits of dead or communications with them constitute the experience of the subtle sphere. So he goes on to spiritualism.
I wonder if all this based on Baba's dictations or based on what Ghani knew?
Yeah,
Well, a bit of both.
that's the question.
Yeah. I mean, Baba was dictating to him, we know that.
Well, his long rant against the Muslim
Yeah, that sounds,
ulama, or whatever they are,
yeah.
it seems pretty confident that was him.
That was good,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
He misses no opportunity to
Have a go.
have a go. There was a Dickens character in one of his novels, Thwackum, Mr. Thwackum. Like he was a teacher, doubtless like Lorraine. Thwack, thwack. So Ghani is a Thwackum where the ulama are concerned. Well, we're almost done for this chapter. We could see how much more there is. And where how far do you want to go?
Ward, I seem to have two 17s. 2 pages of 17.
You very well could, because there's probably more than two in the course of all this material. You're going to start getting...
Yeah, you might need to read it twice.
That's right. That's because, Ghani didn't think you would get it the first time.
Yes, but 217 seems to be familiar.
You got 2 17s too.
Right.
Maybe Ward is the problem. He can't.
Yeah, you never know.
16.
You can't count.
I've only got 10
17.
fingers.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
Yeah. Any other readers, or
I'm not.
you're not?
Can't see enough.
I'll read a little bit here. If anyone wants to. Yeah. In the spiritualism. So now he goes after this. In the dreaming state, everyone necessarily uses his subtle body, but subconsciously. Through his subtle body, he experiences different sensations pertaining only to the gross. Therefore, ordinary dreams are merely the experiences of the gross through the subtle organs in the subconscious state. The gross and the subtle spheres are linked to each other, I guess. Is that what it says? Not clear, please elucidate. etc. Under certain conditions, it is possible to use the physical organs consciously in such a way that we contact the spirits of the dead. Spirit communication is the experiencing of the semi-subtle through the physical organs in the conscious state. Such spirit communication has nothing to do with gnosis, or the goal of the mystic path, or with the subtle and mental spheres, there is a tremendous difference between the semi-subtle and the subtle spheres. I guess semi-subtle is astral.
Astral, yeah.
Used. After death, the spirits of all human beings, except those who have progressed so far along the spiritual path that they are beyond the fourth plane or the subtle sphere. Now, I've never seen that before. Come to the semi-subtle sphere.
Oh,
In
but then you were saying earlier that if you're on the first or second plane, you've dropped that.
You drop your
Substance.
astral body. In his talks to the Mir Ashram boys, Baba said the place of heaven and hell is the second plane. But I don't think you experience the second plane as such. You probably experience it. I think you use your astral body for the experiencing of heaven and hell, and then drop it and get a new one for your next birth. But I think Baba said beyond, when you get into the subtle world, I thought he said you break the link and drop your astral body. Anyway, in accordance with their mind impressions, nukush e amal, or sanskaras, that seems to be the term that Ghani has used to designate sanskaras, nukush e amal. They are then lodged in heaven or hell, and when these estates are completed, they may either return to take a new body, reincarnate, or return to the semi-subtle sphere for a time. Did you know that? After heaven and hell, you can go back to the sort of...
Is that like an angelic realm or something?
Well, here's what he says. These spirits who are, as it were, in a waiting room, so whatever that means, of the semi-subtle sphere, may be contacted by spirit communication. They may have either finished their terms of pleasure or pain and be awaiting rebirth, or they may be on the point of entering heaven or hell. So that's when you can contact them, before or after. Not when they're in heaven or hell. The semi-subtle sphere and heaven and hell, with their respective experiences, are not real. They are subtle enjoyments and miseries experienced through the subtle organs of the subtle body. The experiences are like those in a dream and are conditioned by the good and bad amal or sanskaras of the individual soul, insan or jivatma. When we awake from our dreams and attain God realization, heaven and hell are found to be imaginary states. Some of the descriptions of life after death are partly true, but very little importance should be attributed to them. Spiritually advanced persons can, of course, communicate with advanced disembodied spirits, but they do not, as a rule, do so, for it is unnecessary. Those in the gross sphere, with some few exceptions, cannot enter into communication with the more advanced spirits, i.e., with those who belong to the mental, subtle mental, and spiritual spheres, because even if those of the mental sphere have to reincarnate, they do not pass through or haunt the waiting room of the semi-subtle sphere. It's interesting, you can't contact them because they don't go there where the computers are for your internet. No internet cafe, they don't go to the internet cafe.
That's it.
True spirituality has nothing to do with communication with the spirits of the dead. Certain experiences are usual just before one is to enter the spiritual path. That is, before one enters the first state or plane. They are, 1, a faint but unimaginably rich musical sound is heard. 2, an almost suppressed yet indescribably sweet scent is smelt. 3, unsteady but clear flashes of extremely dazzling light are seen. Now, I've never seen it described quite that much. These experiences of hearing, smelling, and seeing, so taste and touch are gone, have nothing to do with the gross organs of the human body. The traveler may lack the physical organs of the human body, yet when he is about to start on the inner path, he can have these experiences. This is not the experience of the subtle sphere in full consciousness. The hearing is faint, the sensation of smell is incomplete, and the seeing is flashes, because the subtle sense organs develop only as the pilgrim proceeds. Anyone want to read about the different types of pilgrims?
There are 5 types of pilgrims traversing the path, and each type has its own characteristics. These are temporary pilgrims.
This is type 1.
Yeah, type 1. These are temporary pilgrims who find themselves rejected by the world. Their state of mind can be described as vetarg, temporary disgust, which has been the result of shock or disappointment. Very few of these continue in the path of renunciation, and most of them go back to worldly life as soon as they find inviting circumstances. Amongst multiplicity of factors driving a man to the path of spirituality are 2 that stand out in both
Bold relief.
despair and disappointment. Abu Sulaiman Darani says, whenever a man, on account of his actions, is in despairs of his future welfare, that despair shows him the way to salvation and divine mercy.
It's kind of nice.
It opens to him the door of joy and happiness, purges away sensual corruptions from his heart, and reveals to it divine mysteries. Type 2. Those who are keen on entering the path and who seek the help of the Master come under the category of pilgrims having the attitude of mind known in Vedanta as virag, irrevocable renunciation. The state of mind in which there is a complete disgust for the world and its affairs. The exciting cause that goes such a pilgrim to renounce the world is very flimsy. The exciting cause is very flimsy. Such a soul is saturated with the experience of pain and pleasure through previous lives and is ready for the divine call whenever it comes. The mythological core of different religions furnishes many instances of people suddenly turning away from the world to the spiritual life and later achieving a recognized status on the spiritual hierarchy. Wow, there's a lot of arrows here. Such cases baffle ordinary minds, and true enough, the result in good many cases is quite out of proportion to the exciting cause.
I guess the exciting cause is the particular incident that seems to have provoked it.
A person possessing
Rheumatic.
diathesis may seem none the worse for it for a good part of his life. These two are both doctors, weren't they?
Yes, Abdul Ghani.
Sudden exposure to chill very often precipitates the crisis, and until a precipitating feeling brings it to the surface in its fully manifest form. Somewhere here. Similar, oh, that's all cut out.
According to Duncan.
Oh, it should be rich. Similarly, in the life of a pilgrim before realization, the spiritual preparedness of past lives lies dormant all the time, only waiting for a moral spark to kindle it into spiritual flame, thereby confirming the spiritual dictum that nothing ever goes to the undeserving. Ibrahim ibn Adam, the king of Balkh, had a slave girl attached to the palace who was entrusted with the task of attending to the royal bedroom. The slave girl, while something or other
Making up the bed one morning.
was tempted to lie on it just to feel how the king must be enjoying the richly decorated, soft and silken bedding. Soon after, she lay down on the bed.
She fell asleep.
Fell asleep, yeah. Oh, whoops. By chance, and came into the king came into her, and finding the slave girl asleep on his bed, he sent for his executioner.
Yes,
you're right.
In order to inflict on her 20 lashes while the executioner was carrying out the flogging.
The girl, instead of wilting under the pain,
laughing aloud
to the astonishment of everyone,
of everyone was seeing. When asked for an explanation, she replied, "I am grateful to God for letting me off so cheaply. For a few minutes' sleep in the royal bed, I have been awarded 20 lashes. I shudder to think of the punishment that is awaiting for you, the king, who have been sleeping."
Oh, let's put it up to him.
The king was greatly struck by the pointedness of her remark, and the latent spirit of disgust and renunciation came to the surface. So that, as the story goes, he gave up the kingdom and adopted the path of spirituality.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
I never heard that before.
Yeah.
Type 3, the third type of pilgrim, is one who has taken to the path without the help of the master. Such are the yogis of the Hindu world, and they abound in the region of the Himalayas. The Muslim world has very few of this type because it does not believe in asceticism.
Rabbaniyat, I never heard that.
Carrying on one's own without guide.
Isn't that interesting? I mean, that there are very few yogi types in the Islamic world.
Yeah.
I mean, it seemed to be so, but I wouldn't have believed that that was the real truth of things. But he seems to be saying that it is.
Except perhaps Muslim musty types.
I suppose
Yeah.
you pass on from the next to the next to the next group.
Yeah.
The type 4, the fourth type of pilgrim, who pushed into the path as if by accident. Such instances are very rare, and those who belong to this category are mostly matter-of-fact, worldly people who have never had any occasion to think of God or spirituality. There is an instance of Kabir giving a spark of spirituality to a thief who happened to take refuge in his house. The thief was running away from his
Pursuers.
who were hard on his heels. Finding himself in a tight corner, he saw the door of a house open, and so rushed inside, slammed the door, and before
begged
the master of the house to save him from the hands of the law. Kabir, who was the master of the house, asked him to slip into by the side. Slip into what? By the side of his daughter,
Slip.
who was asleep, and cover himself with a blanket.
Wow.
My goodness.
his
When
pursuers.
his pursuers arrived and asked Kabir where the thief was, Kabir said that there was no one in the house except his son-in-law and his daughter, who were both fast asleep. The thief was very much impressed with Kabir's magnanimity and forswore the evil ways of his previous life and became Kabir's disciple.
There you go.
Aye, this category consists of prepared souls whom the Master picks out from whatever situation of life they are in and gives their due. The following anecdote will illustrate the point. Hazrat Junaid of Baghdad was once approached by some people who said to him, "Sire, is your spiritual jurisdiction confined to the city limits only, or does it extend even beyond into the countryside? At a certain place outside of town, some bad characters are indulging in revelry and wine drinking." The saint promised to look into the matter and went at once to the address given. When the merrymakers saw Junaid approaching, they were panic-stricken and hurriedly threw away their wine and
Covered up. Covered up as best they could.
the telltale signs of their revelry. Junaid told them not to get scared and assured them that he too would like to join them a little drink, since he had no such opportunities in the town.
Junaid is famous for the path of sobriety in Sufism. He's identified with that.
The merrymakers, feeling reassured, said that there was no wine left, but that they would get it for him if he so desired. Junaid indulged in a tilt at them, saying, "You have been lovers of wine for such a long time, and yet you have not developed within yourselves the power to have wine come to you, instead of your having to go out to find it. What if I show you a trick by which you will be able to commandeer wine whenever you feel you want it?" The wine lovers enthusiastically fell in with the idea and showed their willingness to do whatever he asked. Junaid asked them to join him in prayers, and while so engaged, he gave them a spark of illumination, which would ultimately lead them to the wine of eternal bliss.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
The above anecdote bears out the fact that when the master himself goes out to seek the aspirant, the question of eligibility or capability does not arise, Rumi says. His grace is not conditioned by eligibility, but the factors governing eligibility are also conditioned by his grace.
I think we're just about to see it. Yeah, we have one more page. And that's the end of it.
After the word before after candidates, is it?
Yeah, candidates.
In each of the four
Five
categories.
five categories are established on the path. They find themselves in various stages of spiritual unfolding according to the strength of their unwinding
individual motivating
factors. Ram Baba has illuminated this problem by likening the pilgrims to different planes of spirituality to fishermen in proportion to their success in netting in fish of divine factors, and are classified. I seem to put a line through all of this. Those on the shore trying to catch the fish by throwing a net on the waters of the ocean are the yogis, who are said to draw their powers, siddhis, from the ocean of divinity. The self-sustained swayambhu powers of the kutu and satguru are always overflowing, and it is these powers of yogi that the yogis draw upon to work miracles with, to the bewilderment of the world around. 2. There is another class of fishermen who enter the ocean in a boat, and from inside the boat try to net in the fishes. They are the wallis, mahatmas. 3. The few who, discarding the boat, try to swim on the surface of the ocean for catching fish are known as satpurushas. 4. Those rare ones who dare to dive to the bottom of the ocean and come up to the surface are known as kutus or satgurus.
Obviously from Baba, that sort of illustration.
I mean, a lot of this, yeah, must be from, I mean, he had lived his life with Baba, so it might be true.
Have you heard all those stories before, or some of that new, all new?
Some of it's new to me. How about you all?
Yeah.
Yeah. They knew, yeah. Some of them are definitely new.
Yeah.
They're quite rich.
Yeah, he was really, he had a knowledge of all this spiritual history.
Oh, thanks for
Yeah,
sharing that.
Thanks, Lord.
Well,
great
we could,
find, isn't it?
if anybody wants, we could do this in future Fridays, or if this is enough, that's fine too. I don't know what your pleasure is. I mean,
I think there's opportunity to allocate another time during the week, because the 10:30 till midday Friday,
yeah.
you know, instead of replacing that, keep that and add this at some point during the week. That'd be my suggestion.
I mean, is there a strong feeling? I mean, maybe this is enough for a lot of people. Maybe you wouldn't. I mean, I'll be reading it. It's my line of work, but.
No, that's good. I'd have another crack at it.
What's that?
I'd have another crack at it.
Yeah.
Another Friday.
Long as
Yeah,
it's
that was
up-
Friday afternoon. It'd be
Another
great.
Friday. Making a third day would be hard
Yeah.
for me to come up.
Yeah.
So extend into Friday afternoon. Is that what you're suggesting? I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. What time? Do you like this time, or would you prefer earlier?
A bit earlier, yeah.
Mm.
I mean, the other thing ends at noon.
It worked well because I had a nap.
Yeah.
Which
What time would you prefer? 2,
and
3?
half
like
hour to an hour for the lunch.
Oh, we gotta have at least that. I mean, it's, you know, otherwise you'd be too tired if you try to cram
Sorry?
it together.
2 o'clock?
2 o'clock.
Together.
Yeah,
No,
two.
2 o'clock sounds good.
Yeah, 2 o'clock would be good.
Two.
I mean, I'm sure this will be published as a book one day. No,
Yeah.
You get a feeling for Ghani. We hear all these funny stories about him, you know, all that, but this is a great name, a great,
Yeah.
great disciple.
He has a couple of books, doesn't he? Small books.
Yeah,
Have you ever seen one, John?
of his books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's, when I was in India last year, that Ali, Ramju, Ali Amju,
Yeah, I got
he
that.
had a little book
He had just
that
finished
was
it.
published by,
Yeah,
not published by, but written by
Ghani.
Ghani.
Yes.
Translated from
I
Urdu.
remember that. I saw that when
Yeah.
I was there too.
I didn't get a copy of it, but he only had a few copies.
He gave me one too.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
the
So-
Kalendar.
He translate now.
Somebody translated from Urdu.
It's
It
a
was
very,
Urdu.
quite a small book. What was it called?
I've forgotten. There's something Kalendar or something.
Yeah.
Calendar was in
He
the
said
title.
it was, yeah, that's the one he said it would be quite controversial.
He said it'd be very controversial for Muslims.
Yes.
Mm.